The paper program crumpled in my trembling hands as my sister-in-law's voice cut through the elementary school auditorium like a blade. Honestly, Sophia, you don't need to sit with the family. There are plenty of seats in the back. The words hung in the air between us, sharp and deliberate, as other parents turned to stare. My nephew Jamie, only 8 years old, stood frozen on stage in his cardboard robot costume, his eyes searching the audience until they found mine. Even from 20 feet away, I could see the confusion flickering across his small face. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. My name is Sophia Chen, I'm 32 years old, and this is the story of how a school auditorium became the stage for the most satisfying moment of my entire life. But to understand how we got there, you need to know about the family that spent 15 years making me feel invisible. The Chen family had always prided itself on appearances. We were the kind of Asian American family that looked perfect from the outside, successful professionals with pristine suburban homes, and children who played violin and spoke 3 languages. My older brother Marcus had followed the script flawlessly, becoming a cardiologist, marrying another doctor, producing 2 academically gifted children who attended private schools and summer programs at prestigious universities. Then there was me, the art teacher, the one who chose creativity over financial security, who taught elementary school instead of pursuing medicine or law. The one who lived in a modest apartment instead of a McMansion, who drove a Honda Civic instead of a BMW, who painted landscapes on weekends instead of playing golf at the country club. For years, I had accepted my role as the family disappointment. At gatherings, I sat quietly while Marcus and his wife Jennifer discussed their latest investment properties and vacation homes. I smiled politely when relatives asked when I was going to find a real career and stop playing with children's finger paints. I nodded along when they suggested I should have stayed in pre-med instead of switching to education. The exclusion had been gradual, like water wearing away stone. First, it was the small things. Family photos where I was positioned at the edge, easy to crop out later, holiday celebrations where my opinion wasn't asked about menu planning or gift exchanges, birthday parties where I learned about the event through social media posts, seeing my family gathered together without me. But Jamie had always been different. From the moment he was born, we had shared a special connection. While his parents pushed him toward advanced mathematics and science programs, Jamie would sneak away during family gatherings to find me in whatever quiet corner I had claimed. He would curl up next to me with a book, asking me to read stories in different voices or show me drawings he had hidden in his backpack. When Jamie started showing interest in theater instead of tennis lessons, his parents were horrified. When he auditioned for the school play instead of joining the debate team, they saw it as another sign of his artistic tendencies that needed to be redirected. They blamed me, of course. Too much time around Aunt Sophia had clearly infected their son with impractical dreams. The phone call had come 3 weeks before the play. Jennifer's voice was crisp and businesslike, the way she spoke to patients' families when delivering bad news. "Sophia, we need to talk about Jamie's performance. Marcus and I think it would be best if you didn't attend. You know how impressionable he is, and we're trying to redirect his interests toward more academic pursuits. Your presence might send the wrong message about the importance of this theater nonsense." I had sat in my small kitchen, holding the phone with hands that had suddenly gone numb. Through my apartment window, I could see the elementary school where I worked, where I had spent the last decade nurturing creativity in hundreds of children just like Jamie. "He asked me to come," I had whispered. "He's been practicing his lines for me every weekend." "That's exactly the problem," Jennifer had replied. "He's more excited about impressing you than focusing on his real studies. We've already talked to him. He understands that family seating is limited and that adults need to prioritize appropriately." The conversation had ended with Jennifer suggesting I send a card instead. A card. For the nephew who had been the bright spot in 15 years of family gatherings, who had never made me feel like a failure, who looked at my small apartment and said it was cozy instead of cramped. That weekend, Jamie had called me himself, his 8-year-old voice trying to sound mature and understanding. Aunt Sophia, Mom says you might be too busy to come to my play. That's okay. I know you have important teacher stuff to do. But I could hear the disappointment beneath his careful words, the same tone he used when he talked about not getting the lead role he had wanted. For days, I had wrestled with the decision. Part of me wanted to respect Jennifer and Marcus's wishes, to avoid another family confrontation that would inevitably end with me being painted as the disruptive influence. But every time I closed my eyes, I saw Jamie in his robot costume during dress rehearsal, asking if I thought his parents would be proud of him. That's when I decided to attend anyway. I told myself it was for Jamie, that one supportive adult in the audience might make the difference between a confident performance and a nervous disaster. I convinced myself that Jennifer and Marcus would be too focused on their son to make a scene in public. I had been wrong about that last part. The Roosevelt Elementary School auditorium was buzzing with the excited energy that only comes from rooms full of parents armed with cameras and flowers. I had arrived early, choosing a seat in the middle section where I could see Jamie clearly, but hopefully avoid immediate detection by my family. I wore my best dress, a navy blue piece I had bought for parent-teacher conferences, and carried a small bouquet of daisies that I planned to give Jamie after the show. For 20 minutes, I sat peacefully, watching other families file in and claim their territories, grandparents with cushioned seat covers, siblings with bags of snacks, parents juggling programs and cell phone cameras. It was the kind of community event that reminded me why I loved working in education, where every child on that stage would be someone's entire world for 90 minutes. Then I saw them. Marcus and Jennifer entered like visiting royalty, Jennifer's heels clicking across the linoleum floor with authority. Behind them came my parents, my grandmother, and Jennifer's parents, a full contingent of the Chen family support system. They filed into the third row, the prime seating area that Jennifer had clearly reserved in advance. I sank lower in my seat, hoping the dim pre-show lighting would keep me hidden until after the performance. Jamie deserved to have his family there, even if that family had made it clear I wasn't really part of it anymore. I could slip out during the applause, leave the flowers on the gift table, and drive home knowing I had kept my promise to be there for him. But Jennifer had always possessed an uncanny ability to locate anything that didn't belong in her carefully curated world. Her head turned slowly, scanning the audience like a security system until her gaze locked onto mine. The temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. She leaned over to whisper something to Marcus, who turned to look at me with the same expression he might wear when discovering a mistake in a medical chart. Within moments, the entire family contingent had been alerted to my presence. My mother's face flushed with embarrassment. My grandmother shook her head in obvious disapproval. Jennifer's parents, who had never particularly liked me, looked like they were watching a vagrant disturb their peaceful evening. The lights hadn't even dimmed for the opening number when Jennifer stood up. She moved through the row of seated family members with the fluid determination of someone accustomed to taking charge in crisis situations. Other parents glanced up curiously as she made her way toward my section, her expression set in the professional mask she wore when dealing with difficult patients. She stopped at the end of my row, leaning down so that her words would carry to the several families seated nearby. Honestly, Sophia, you don't need to sit with the family. There are plenty of seats in the back. The suggestion was delivered with the kind of false sweetness that made it sound like a helpful recommendation rather than a public dismissal. The families around me grew quiet, sensing drama. I felt heat rise in my cheeks, the familiar flush of humiliation that had accompanied so many family interactions over the years. On stage, the children were taking their positions for the opening scene, and I could see Jamie adjusting his cardboard robot head, looking out into the audience for familiar faces. "I'm fine here," I managed to say, my voice barely above a whisper. "I can see Jamie well from this spot." Jennifer's smile grew sharper. "The thing is, we have reserved seating, and it's important that immediate family sits together for photos. You understand?" She gestured toward the back of the auditorium, where folding chairs had been set up for overflow seating. "There's much better lighting back there anyway."
The suggestion wasn't really a suggestion. It was a directive delivered in front of 30 strangers, designed to make it clear that I was not immediate family, that my presence was tolerated but not welcomed, that I should know my place in the hierarchy. I looked toward the stage, where Jamie was now visible in the wings, waiting for his entrance. Even from a distance, I could see him scanning the audience, his small face bright with anticipation. He had practiced his lines for me every weekend for 2 months. He had asked me to help him make his robot sound effects more realistic. He had begged me to come see him perform. But as I sat there, feeling the weight of judgmental stares and Jennifer's expectant smile, I realized that this moment was bigger than just one school play. This was the culmination of 15 years of being made to feel like I didn't belong, like my choices were wrong, like my love for my nephew was somehow inappropriate or unhelpful. I gathered my purse and the small bouquet of daisies, standing up with as much dignity as I could muster. "Of course," I said, loud enough for the nearby families to hear. I wouldn't want to cause any problems. The walk to the back of the auditorium felt like a mile. I could feel eyes following me, whispered conversations starting in my wake. Some parents looked sympathetic, others merely curious about the family drama playing out in their children's school. I chose a folding chair in the last row, next to a maintenance closet, where I could watch my nephew perform from behind 40 rows of real family members. Jennifer returned to the reserved section with the satisfied air of someone who had handled an awkward situation professionally. The Chen family contingent settled back into their seats, adjusting cameras and straightening programs, the disruption smoothed over and forgotten. But as the lights dimmed and the children took the stage, I saw Jamie's robot head turn toward the family section, searching. His shoulders sagged slightly when he didn't immediately spot me in the crowd. Even from the back row, I could see the moment of confusion, the small hesitation before he remembered his opening line. That's when something inside me cracked. Not broke, but cracked, like ice under pressure. I had spent 15 years accepting that I was the family disappointment, the one who had chosen the wrong path, the aunt who needed to be managed and contained. I had internalized their judgment, believing that maybe they were right, maybe I was the problem. But sitting in that folding chair, watching my nephew's momentary confusion, I realized that I had been fighting the wrong battle. I had been trying to prove that I belonged with them, when what I should have been proving was that I belonged exactly where I was. The play began, and Jamie transformed into his robot character with the kind of commitment that only 8-year-olds can bring to cardboard costumes and handmade props. He delivered his lines with perfect timing, moved with robotic precision, and even managed the complex sound effects we had practiced together. From the back row, I watched him shine, but I also watched my family. I saw Marcus check his phone during the second scene. I saw Jennifer whisper comments to her mother about the other children's costumes. I saw my parents struggle to stay awake during the slower musical numbers. They were present, but they weren't really there. They had come out of obligation, not enthusiasm. During intermission, I stayed in my seat while families milled around, sharing snacks and comparing notes about their children's performances. The Chen contingent remained clustered in their reserved section, discussing dinner plans and weekend schedules. No one mentioned Jamie's performance. No one talked about how well he had done or how proud they were. I pulled out my phone and did something I hadn't done in months. I opened social media and began scrolling through posts about the play. Parents were already uploading photos and videos, praising their young performers, sharing proud moments. I found the school's official page and read through comments from teachers and administrators. That's when I saw it. A comment from Principal Martinez. "So proud of our young actors tonight. Special recognition to Jamie Chen for his dedication and improvement this semester. His robot portrayal was fantastic." I screenshot the comment and stared at it for a long moment. Here was someone who saw Jamie's potential, who recognized his growth, who understood that a child's passion for performance was something to be celebrated, not redirected. As the second act began, I made a decision that would change everything. Instead of slipping out during the final applause like I had planned, I was going to stay. I was going to wait in the lobby afterward. I was going to give Jamie his flowers and tell him how proud I was. And if Jennifer didn't like it, she could explain to her 8-year-old son why his aunt wasn't allowed to congratulate him on his performance. But first, I was going to do something else. Something that, at the time, felt like a small act of rebellion, but would turn out to be the foundation of everything that happened next. I was going to research Principal Martinez. The internet connection in the school was surprisingly good. While the children performed their final musical number, I sat in my back row folding chair and began digging into the background of the man who had praised my nephew's performance. Principal Martinez had been at Roosevelt Elementary for 8 years, I learned. Before that, he had taught high school theater in California. He had a master's degree in educational leadership and had written several articles about the importance of arts education in elementary schools. But that wasn't what caught my attention. What made me sit up straighter in my folding chair was a news article from 2 years ago. Principal Martinez had been featured in the district newsletter for launching an innovative arts integration program at Roosevelt Elementary. The program had received state funding and recognition for its success in improving student engagement across all subjects. The article mentioned that the program had been so successful that Principal Martinez had been invited to present at national education conferences. He had spoken at workshops about using creative expression to reach struggling students. He had been featured in education journals and had consulted with other districts looking to implement similar programs. As I read more, a picture began to form. Principal Martinez wasn't just an elementary school administrator. He was a recognized expert in arts education, someone whose opinions carried weight in educational circles far beyond our small district. More importantly, he was someone who clearly believed in exactly what I had been doing for the past decade. Someone who understood that creativity wasn't a distraction from real learning, but a pathway to it. Someone who saw potential in children like Jamie instead of problems to be solved.
The final applause erupted around me, parents leaping to their feet with cameras and bouquets. I stood too, clapping enthusiastically as the young performers took their bows. Jamie's robot head bobbed with excitement as he waved to the audience, his metallic costume catching the stage lights. As the curtain fell and families began gathering in the lobby, I made my way toward the stage area. The hallways were crowded with children still in costume, parents offering congratulations, teachers helping with quick changes out of elaborate outfits. I found Jamie near his classroom, still wearing his robot body, but with his cardboard head tucked under his arm. His face was flushed with excitement and accomplishment, the kind of pure joy that comes from knowing you've done something well. "Aunt Sophia!" He ran toward me, his costume clanking with each step. "Did you see me? Did you see my robot voice? We practiced it just like you said." I knelt down to his level and handed him the bouquet of daisies. "You were absolutely perfect, Jamie. I am so proud of you." "My mom said you might not come because you were busy," he said, his voice dropping slightly. "But I looked for you during my first scene and I couldn't find you." "I was here," I told him firmly. "I was here the whole time, and I saw every single line you delivered. You were the best robot I've ever seen." His grin returned, wide and genuine. "Really? Even better than the robots in movies?" "Even better than the robots in movies." That's when I heard Jennifer's voice behind me, sharp with irritation. "Jamie, come away from there. We need to take family photos before we leave." I stood up slowly, still holding Jamie's hand. Jennifer approached with Marcus close behind, their expressions set in matching looks of parental authority mixed with social embarrassment. "Sophia, we talked about this," Jennifer said, her voice low but carrying clearly in the crowded hallway. "Family photos are for immediate family." Before I could respond, a voice cut through the conversation with calm authority. "Excuse me, are you Jamie's family?" We all turned to see Principal Martinez approaching, still wearing his dress shirt and tie from the evening's event. He was a man in his late 40s with graying temples and kind eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses. He moved with the confident ease of someone comfortable in his own environment. "Yes," Marcus said, stepping forward with the automatic assumption that he would be the family spokesperson.
Marcus Chen, Jamie's father. This is my wife Jennifer. Principal Martinez shook their hands politely, then turned his attention to me. And you must be the aunt Jamie talks about so frequently. Sophia, isn't it? I nodded, surprised that he knew my name. Yes, I'm Jamie's aunt. Thank you for putting together such a wonderful program. Actually, I was hoping to speak with you, Principal Martinez said, his tone shifting to something more professional. Jamie has mentioned several times that you're an elementary art teacher. I'd love to discuss some opportunities we might have here at Roosevelt. Jennifer's eyebrows raised sharply. Opportunities? Principal Martinez smiled, but his attention remained focused on me. We're always looking for experienced educators who understand the value of creative expression in child development. Sophia, would you have time next week to discuss some consulting work? We're expanding our arts integration program and could use someone with your background. The hallway around us had grown quiet, other families sensing an important conversation taking place. I could feel Jennifer's tension radiating beside me, her carefully controlled world suddenly shifting in an unexpected direction. I'd be very interested, I managed to say, my voice stronger than I felt. I've been following Roosevelt's arts program, and I'm impressed with what you've accomplished here. Excellent, Principal Martinez said, pulling out a business card. Why don't you call my office Monday morning? We can set up a proper meeting to discuss the details. As he handed me the card, he turned back to Jamie, who had been listening to the conversation with wide-eyed interest. And you, young man, gave an outstanding performance tonight. I hope you'll consider auditioning for our spring musical. Jamie's face lit up like Christmas morning. Really? There's going to be another play? There certainly is, and I think you'd be perfect for one of the lead roles. Principal Martinez excused himself to speak with other families, leaving the four of us standing in the hallway with a business card that felt like it weighed 10 pounds in my hand. The silence stretched uncomfortably as Jennifer and Marcus processed what had just happened. Well, Jennifer said finally, her voice carefully neutral, that's interesting. But I could see the calculation behind her eyes, the rapid reassessment of my value that came with professional recognition from someone she respected. Principal Martinez wasn't just any administrator. He was the person responsible for her son's education, someone whose opinion about Jamie's future mattered. We should probably get going, Marcus said, glancing at his watch. It's getting late for Jamie. As they gathered their things and prepared to leave, Jamie looked up at me with hope in his eyes. Aunt Sophia, does this mean you might work at my school? I smiled down at him, feeling something shift inside me, like tectonic plates finding new alignment. It means we'll have to wait and see, sweetheart, but I promise I'll always be here to watch you perform. Jennifer's expression tightened, almost imperceptibly, but she said nothing. The family group began moving toward the exit, and I followed at a respectful distance, no longer the awkward appendage to be managed, but something else entirely. Something that had value, something that had been recognized, something that belonged.
As we reached the parking lot, I heard Jennifer speaking quietly to Marcus, her voice carrying just far enough for me to catch fragments. Need to be careful about, and Jamie's getting ideas, and maybe we should reconsider. But for the first time in 15 years, I didn't care what they were saying about me. I had Principal Martinez's business card in my purse, Jamie's proud smile fixed in my memory, and the beginning of an idea that maybe, just maybe, I had been playing the wrong game entirely. The drive home that night was different than any drive I had taken after a family event. Instead of replaying moments of exclusion and humiliation, I found myself thinking about arts integration programs and consulting opportunities. Instead of wondering what I had done wrong, I was planning what I might do right. By the time I reached my small apartment, I had made a decision. I was going to research Principal Martinez's program thoroughly. I was going to prepare for that meeting like it was the most important interview of my career. And I was going to find out exactly what kind of opportunities existed for someone with my background and experience. But first, I was going to do something I hadn't done in months. I was going to call in sick on Monday morning, not because I was unwell, but because I had work to do. The kind of work that might change everything. The kind of work that might finally prove that choosing creativity over convention hadn't been a mistake after all.
Monday morning arrived with the kind of clarity that only comes after sleepless nights spent planning. I had called Roosevelt Elementary at 6:30, leaving a message that I would be taking a personal day. My own principal, Mrs. Davidson, wouldn't question it. In 5 years at Maplewood Elementary, I had used exactly 3 sick days, and my lesson plans were always prepared weeks in advance. Instead of standing in front of my usual classroom of 28 third graders, I was sitting at my kitchen table with 3 cups of coffee, my laptop, and a stack of printed articles about educational reform. The business card Principal Martinez had given me lay beside my notepad like a talisman, its edges already softened from handling. The first thing I had discovered during my late-night research session was that I had been thinking too small, way too small. Principal Martinez wasn't just some elementary school administrator who happened to appreciate the arts. He was Dr. Eduardo Martinez, former professor of educational psychology at Stanford University. He had left academia 5 years ago to take the Roosevelt position, but not because he was stepping down. He was stepping up. Roosevelt Elementary had become his laboratory for educational innovation. The arts integration program I had read about was just the beginning. Under his leadership, the school had become a model for what he called whole child education, an approach that recognized creativity, emotional intelligence, and critical thinking as equally important as traditional academic skills. The program had been so successful that the Department of Education had designated Roosevelt as a national demonstration site. Educators from around the country came to observe classes and learn from the methods being implemented there. The school had received grants totaling over $2 million in the past 3 years. But here was the part that made my hands shake as I typed notes. Dr. Martinez was in the final stages of writing a book about his educational philosophy, and he was actively consulting with districts across the state about implementing similar programs. He wasn't just running one elementary school, he was building a movement, and he wanted to talk to me about consulting work. I had spent 15 years being told that my career choice was impractical, that teaching art to children was a waste of my intelligence, that I should have pursued something more substantial. My family had made me believe that I was underachieving, settling for less, choosing the easy path because I couldn't handle the demands of a real profession. But as I read through Dr. Martinez's published papers and watched video presentations from his conference speeches, I began to understand that I hadn't been underachieving at all. I had been working in the exact field that forward-thinking educators considered the future of learning. More than that, I had been doing it well, really well. I pulled out my teaching portfolio, a thick binder I updated annually for evaluations but rarely looked at otherwise. As I flipped through 5 years of lesson plans, student artwork, and assessment data, I saw my work through different eyes. The mural project I had implemented with fourth graders hadn't been just an art activity. It had been an interdisciplinary learning experience that incorporated history, mathematics, and collaborative problem solving. The poetry illustration unit I had developed with the third grade teachers hadn't been just about pretty pictures. It had been about visual literacy and comprehension strategies that helped struggling readers access text in new ways. The after-school art club I ran wasn't just a babysitting service for working parents. It was a therapeutic space where children processed emotions, built confidence, and developed skills they couldn't access through traditional academics alone. I had documentation proving that students in my program showed improved behavior, better peer relationships, and increased engagement in their regular classrooms. I had been doing exactly what Dr. Martinez advocated, but I had been doing it in isolation, without recognition, without understanding that my methods aligned with cutting-edge educational research. By 10 in the morning, I had filled 12 pages with notes and had a plan that went far beyond a simple consulting conversation. I was going to walk into Dr. Martinez's office prepared to demonstrate not just that I could contribute to his program, but that I had been implementing similar approaches for years without even realizing it. But first, I needed to understand exactly what Roosevelt Elementary was doing and how it compared to my own methods. I needed to visit the school, not as Jamie's aunt attending a play, but as an educator studying best practices. I called the main office and spoke to the secretary, explaining that I was an art teacher interested in observing their arts integration program. She scheduled me for a Thursday morning visit, mentioning that Dr. Martinez often gave personal tours to visiting educators. Thursday morning, I dressed more carefully than I had for any job interview in my career. Professional but creative, authoritative but approachable. I wore my best blazer over dark jeans and carried a leather portfolio that contained my teaching materials, my research on Roosevelt's program, and a presentation I had spent 3 days creating. The Roosevelt Elementary I entered that morning was nothing like the dimly lit auditorium where I had sat in a folding chair 4 days earlier. In the bright light of day, the building buzzed with purposeful energy.
Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story.
Student artwork covered every wall, but it wasn't the typical elementary school decoration of construction paper cutouts and crayon drawings. These were sophisticated projects that clearly integrated multiple subjects and demonstrated complex thinking. A third-grade classroom had created a timeline of local history illustrated with detailed drawings and accompanied by written reports. Fourth graders had designed and built architectural models while studying geometry and urban planning. Fifth grade students had painted portraits of community helpers alongside biographical research and reflection essays about career aspirations. Dr. Martinez met me in the main lobby, looking exactly as I remembered, but somehow different in his own environment. Here, he moved with the confidence of someone who knew he was exactly where he belonged, doing exactly what he was meant to do. "Sophia, welcome to Roosevelt," he said, shaking my hand with genuine warmth. "I'm excited to show you what we've been building here." The tour that followed was a revelation. In classroom after classroom, I saw teachers seamlessly blending creative expression with academic content. Students were engaged, confident, articulate about their learning. The energy was completely different from the compliance-focused atmosphere I was used to in my own district. But more than that, I saw my own methods reflected and amplified. The collaborative projects I had pioneered in isolation were being implemented school-wide. The assessment strategies I had developed to measure creative growth were similar to tools Roosevelt used across all subjects. The social-emotional learning I facilitated through art was embedded in every aspect of their curriculum. During our conversation in his office afterward, Dr. Martinez leaned forward with the intensity of someone who had found a kindred spirit. "Tell me about your experience with arts integration, Sophia. Jamie mentioned that you've helped him understand how creativity connects to other subjects." I opened my portfolio and began sharing my work, watching his expression shift from polite interest to genuine excitement. When I showed him documentation of improved standardized test scores among students in my arts programs, he stopped me. "Wait, you're telling me you've seen measurable academic improvement through creative programming, and you've been doing this in a traditional district setting without administrative support?" I nodded. "I've been doing it for 5 years, but I always assumed it was just good teaching practice. I didn't realize it was aligned with educational research until I started reading about your program." Dr. Martinez was quiet for a moment, studying my materials. Then he looked up with an expression I had never seen directed at me before. It was respect, professional recognition, the look of someone who understood exactly what they were seeing. "Sophia, I don't think you understand how significant this is. What you've accomplished in isolation, without resources or support, demonstrates exactly the kind of educational leadership we need more of. You haven't just been teaching art, you've been proving that integrative approaches work." He pulled out a thick folder from his desk drawer. "I've been looking for the right person to help me take this program to the next level. Someone with classroom experience, proven results, and the vision to see how creative education can transform learning." The folder contained grant applications, conference proposals, and correspondence with other districts interested in implementing Roosevelt's approach. As I read through the documents, I realized that Dr. Martinez wasn't just running a successful elementary school. He was building a network, creating a movement, developing a model that could be replicated across the country. And he was looking for a partner. "I'd like to offer you a position as our arts integration coordinator," he said. "It would be a district-level position, working between Roosevelt and our other schools to implement and evaluate creative learning programs.
The salary would be 30% higher than standard teacher pay, plus benefits and conference travel. I stared at him, certain I had misheard. You're offering me a job based on one conversation? I'm offering you a job based on 5 years of documented success, innovative thinking, and the kind of passion for education that can't be taught. He smiled. Plus, any teacher who can help Jamie Chen find his creative confidence while navigating his family's academic expectations clearly understands how to work with complex family dynamics. That last comment made me look up sharply. Dr. Martinez's expression was knowing but kind. Small district, Sophia. I know the Chen family well. I also know that Jamie's sudden interest in performance and creative expression coincided with his increased time spent with his aunt. I've been hoping to meet the educator who inspired such growth in one of my students. As I drove home that afternoon, I carried more than just a job offer. I carried a complete reframing of my professional identity. For the first time in my career, I understood that I hadn't been working in the margins of education. I had been working at its cutting edge. But the job offer also presented a complicated situation. Taking a position at Roosevelt would mean working directly with Jamie's school, inserting myself professionally into a family dynamic that had already proven volatile. Jennifer and Marcus would no longer be able to dismiss my career as playing with finger paints. They would have to acknowledge that their son's school valued my expertise enough to create a leadership position for me. More than that, they would have to confront the fact that their attempts to redirect Jamie away from creative expression were completely contrary to the educational philosophy of the school they had chosen for him. I spent that evening researching the implications of my potential decision. A district-level position would give me influence over educational policy, access to resources I had never dreamed of, and the opportunity to impact hundreds of students instead of just my current classroom of 28. But it would also mean leaving Maplewood Elementary, where I had built relationships and programs over 5 years. It would mean stepping into a more visible role, one that would inevitably bring me into conflict with family members who had spent 15 years trying to diminish my professional achievements. The decision became clear when I received a text message from Jamie that evening. It was a photo of his robot costume hanging in his bedroom closet, carefully preserved, with a message that said, "Mom says I can't try out for the spring musical because it conflicts with math tutoring, but I'm going to ask if I can audition anyway. You said I was brave like a robot." I stared at that message for a long time, thinking about 8-year-old courage and the adults who either nurture it or crush it. I thought about Jennifer's determination to redirect Jamie toward more academic pursuits and Marcus's assumption that creative expression was a waste of time. I thought about my nephew growing up believing that the things he loved weren't valuable, that following his passions would disappoint the people whose approval he craved. Then I thought about Dr. Martinez's research, the documented benefits of creative education, the evidence that children like Jamie didn't need to choose between academic success and artistic expression. They could have both if the adults in their lives understood how to support integrated learning. I called Dr. Martinez at home that night, something I never would have done a week earlier. "I accept your offer," I told him.
When can I start? How does next month sound? That would give you time to finish out your current semester and give us time to prepare for your transition. After I hung up, I sat in my small kitchen and tried to process what had just happened. In the span of 1 week, I had gone from being the family disappointment sitting in a folding chair at the back of an auditorium to being offered a leadership position in one of the most innovative educational programs in the state. But I also knew that accepting this position would fundamentally change my relationship with my family. They would no longer be able to treat me as the unsuccessful sibling who needed their tolerance and occasional charity. They would have to acknowledge that I had built something meaningful, that my choices had led to professional recognition and financial success. Some families would celebrate that kind of transformation. Some families would be proud to discover that their overlooked member had been achieving all along. But the Chen family had built their identity around having one success story and one cautionary tale. Marcus was the doctor who had followed the correct path. I was the art teacher who had settled for less. If I was no longer settling for less, it would require them to reconceptualize 15 years of family narrative. I suspected they wouldn't embrace that reconceptualization willingly.
The next morning, I submitted my resignation to Maplewood Elementary and began the process of transitioning my current students to a substitute teacher. Mrs. Davidson was shocked but supportive, particularly when I explained the nature of my new position. "Sophia, this is incredible news," she said, reviewing my resignation letter. "I always knew you were talented, but I had no idea you were working at this level. Will you consider consulting here once you're established in your new role?" That conversation was repeated throughout the day as word spread among my colleagues. Teachers who had worked beside me for 5 years were suddenly seeing my classroom methods in a new light, recognizing innovations they had taken for granted. "You've been doing arts integration all along," said Mrs. Peterson, the third-grade team leader. "I just thought you were really good at making learning fun. I didn't realize you were implementing research-based best practices." By the end of the day, 3 teachers had asked if I would help them develop similar programs in their own classrooms. The principal had requested a meeting about potential partnerships between Roosevelt and Maplewood. 2 parents had stopped by to ask if I would continue working with their children in my new role. For the first time in my career, I felt like my colleagues saw me as an expert rather than just an enthusiastic hobbyist. But the real test would come when I told my family. I decided to start with Jamie. He deserved to hear the news directly from me, and his reaction would help me gauge how the information might be received by his parents. I picked him up from school that Friday, something I had been doing occasionally since the play. Jennifer had been allowing these outings since Dr. Martinez had expressed interest in my work, a calculated decision to maintain good relationships with school administration. We went to the park near his house, the same place where I had been taking him since he was old enough to walk. As we sat on the swings, I explained that I would be starting a new job at his school. Jamie's eyes went wide. "You're going to work at Roosevelt? Does that mean I'll see you every day?" "Not every day, but more often. I'll be helping all the teachers figure out how to make learning more creative and fun." "Like what we do when you help me with my homework?" I smiled, remembering all the times I had turned his math problems into story problems about robots, or helped him understand science concepts through drawing and model making. "Exactly like that." Jamie was quiet for a moment, processing. Then he looked at me with the serious expression he wore when he was working through something important. "Does this mean my mom and dad will think your job is important now?" The question hit me harder than I had expected. 8 years old, and Jamie had already internalized his parents' assessment of my career value. He understood on some level that the adults in his family didn't consider my work significant. "I think they might understand my job differently now," I said carefully. "But the important thing is that you know I've always been doing work that matters. Teaching and helping children learn is always important work." Jamie nodded solemnly. "I know that, Aunt Sophia. I just wish my parents knew it too." That evening, I decided to tell my family about the job offer in the most neutral way possible. I sent a group text message explaining that I had been offered a district-level position at Roosevelt Elementary and would be starting after the winter break. The responses came quickly and revealed exactly what I had expected. Jennifer: "Congratulations! It will be nice to have you more involved in Jamie's educational environment." Marcus: "Good news, Soph. Steady district work is much more stable than classroom teaching." My mother: "Finally, a position with some administrative responsibility. I'm proud of you for advancing your career." Each response managed to be simultaneously congratulatory and condescending. They were pleased that I was moving up, but their pleasure was based on the assumption that I was finally moving towards something more legitimate, more important, more worthy of respect. None of them asked about the nature of the work. None of them mentioned the salary increase or the professional recognition. None of them seemed to understand that this wasn't a lateral move into administration, but recognition of expertise I had been developing for years. But that was exactly what I had expected. What I hadn't expected was the message that came an hour later from Jennifer, sent privately rather than to the group chat. "Sophia, I wanted to reach out personally about your new position. Marcus and I are thrilled that you'll be working more closely with Jamie's school. We hope this means you'll have better insight into his academic needs and can help reinforce our focus on preparing him for advanced coursework." I stared at that message for several minutes, parsing the subtext. Jennifer wasn't congratulating me on professional advancement. She was expressing relief that I would now be positioned to support her academic agenda for Jamie rather than encouraging his creative interests. She still didn't understand what my new role would actually entail. I decided not to clarify immediately. Let her maintain her assumptions for a few more weeks. The reality would become clear soon enough. During my remaining time at Maplewood, I worked with Dr. Martinez to develop a transition plan and began researching the broader implications of my new position. The Arts Integration Coordinator role was more expansive than I had initially understood.
I would be working not just with Roosevelt, but with all 6 elementary schools in the district, plus the middle school and high school arts programs. I would be responsible for curriculum development, teacher training, grant writing, assessment design, and program evaluation. I would be presenting at state education conferences and collaborating with university researchers studying creative learning approaches. Most importantly, I would be documenting and disseminating the methods that had proven successful at Roosevelt, helping other schools implement similar programs. The more I learned about the scope of the position, the more I realized that this wasn't just a job change, it was a career transformation that positioned me as a leader in educational innovation. But it also meant that in less than a month, I would be walking into Jamie's school not as the overlooked aunt who had been relegated to folding chairs in the back row, but as a district administrator whose expertise was valued at the highest levels of educational leadership. My family still had no idea what was coming. The last week before winter break, Dr. Martinez invited me to attend a district meeting where I would be introduced to the other administrators and begin learning about my new responsibilities. The meeting was scheduled for the same evening as the Chen family's annual holiday party, an event I had been strategically uninvited from for the past 3 years. This year, however, Jennifer had extended a cautious invitation, clearly motivated by my new connection to Roosevelt Elementary. "We'd love to have you join us for holiday celebrations this year, Sophia. It's time to put past misunderstandings behind us." I accepted both invitations, planning to attend the district meeting first and join the family gathering afterward. It would be an interesting experiment in code switching, moving from a professional environment where my expertise was valued to a family environment where I was still working to establish basic respect. The district meeting was held in the conference room at Roosevelt Elementary, the same building where I had sat in that back row folding chair just 1 month earlier. As I walked through the familiar hallways, now carrying a briefcase and wearing a suit that conveyed professional authority, I felt like I was moving through different versions of my own story. Dr. Martinez introduced me to the other district administrators with genuine enthusiasm. Sophia Chen is joining us as our new Arts Integration Coordinator. She brings 5 years of classroom experience implementing creative learning strategies with documented success in student engagement and academic achievement. The conversation that followed was unlike any professional discussion I had ever experienced. These administrators spoke about my work with respect, asked thoughtful questions about my methods, and expressed excitement about the potential for expansion across the district. The curriculum director wanted to know about my assessment strategies. The special education coordinator was interested in my experience with creative interventions for struggling learners. The technology director asked about digital tools I had used to document student progress. For 2 hours, I was treated as an expert in my field, someone whose insights and experience could benefit the entire district. When the meeting ended, several administrators lingered to continue conversations about potential collaborations. As I drove from Roosevelt Elementary to my parents' house for the holiday party, I carried with me a completely different sense of professional identity than I had possessed that morning. I was no longer just Sophia the art teacher. I was Sophia the educational specialist, the program coordinator, the district administrator. But I was walking into a family gathering where, despite my recent professional advancement, I knew I would still be viewed as the lesser child, the one who had settled for an easier path, the cautionary tale about the dangers of following your passion instead of practical considerations. The Chen holiday party was exactly as I remembered from years past. The house was impeccably decorated, the food was catered from the family's favorite restaurant, and the conversation centered around professional achievements and financial successes. Marcus held court in the living room, discussing a recent promotion and a new investment property.
Jennifer circulated with hostess confidence, ensuring everyone's drinks were full and the conversation remained appropriately impressive. When I arrived, there was a moment of surprised silence. I was dressed differently than usual, carrying myself with new confidence, looking less like someone grateful to be included and more like someone who had somewhere else she could be. "Sophia," my mother exclaimed, embracing me with the kind of enthusiasm she usually reserved for Marcus's accomplishments. "You look so professional. The new job must be treating you well already." I accepted congratulations from various relatives, most of whom seemed pleasantly surprised that I had finally achieved what they considered real professional advancement. The conversations were warmer than they had been in years, but they were also based on fundamental misunderstandings about the nature of my work. Uncle Richard, Marcus's father-in-law, pulled me aside for a man-to-man conversation about career development. "It's good to see you moving into administration, Sophia. Teaching is fine for young people, but eventually you need to advance to positions with real authority." Aunt Carol, Jennifer's mother, offered advice about professional wardrobes and networking strategies. "Now that you're in district leadership, you'll need to dress the part. Let me know if you'd like recommendations for professional clothing stores." Each conversation reinforced the family's belief that I had finally recognized the inadequacy of my previous choices and was taking steps to correct my career trajectory. They saw my new position as evidence that I was growing up, getting serious, moving towards something more worthy of respect. None of them asked about the actual work I would be doing. None of them seemed curious about the programs I would be developing or the research I would be implementing. They were simply relieved that I had finally achieved a title that sounded impressive at dinner parties. Jamie, however, was different. He found me in the kitchen during a quiet moment and tugged on my sleeve with the conspiratorial air of someone with important secrets to share. "Aunt Sophia, I heard my mom telling Grandma that your new job means you'll make sure I focus more on math and science. But that's not what you're going to do, right?" I knelt down to his level, recognizing the anxiety in his voice. "What do you think I'm going to do in my new job?" "I think you're going to help other kids learn the way you help me learn, with drawing and stories and making things fun." He paused, considering. "I think you're going to help teachers be more like you." I smiled, amazed by his intuitive understanding. "That's exactly right, Jamie. I'm going to help teachers understand that learning can be creative and fun and still be really important." "So I can still try out for the spring musical?" That question revealed the heart of his concern. Despite my professional advancement, despite the family's renewed interest in including me, Jamie was still caught between competing visions of what his education should prioritize. "We'll have to see what happens," I told him honestly, "but I want you to know that creative expression and academic success aren't opposites. You can be good at both." As the evening progressed, I found myself observing the family dynamics with new eyes. These people had spent 15 years making me feel like I didn't belong, like my choices were wrong, like my contributions weren't valuable. They had excluded me from celebrations, dismissed my career, and made me question my own worth. But they had done all of this from a position of ignorance. They genuinely didn't understand the value of creative education, the importance of arts integration, or the growing recognition that traditional academic approaches were insufficient for preparing students for future challenges. They weren't malicious. They were simply operating from outdated assumptions about what constituted success and importance in education. The question was whether they would be willing to update those assumptions when faced with evidence that contradicted their beliefs, or whether they would double down on positions that were no longer defensible. I suspected I was about to find out. As the party wound down and relatives began gathering coats and making departure plans, Jennifer approached me with the careful smile she wore when she wanted something. "Sophia, I'm so glad you could join us tonight. I hope this means we can put the past behind us and move forward as a family." She paused, choosing her words carefully.
I also hope your new position means you'll have a better understanding of Jamie's educational needs and can support our academic goals for him. I looked at her for a moment, recognizing the olive branch, but also understanding the conditions attached to it. I was welcome in the family as long as I used my new professional authority to support their existing beliefs about Jamie's education. "I'm looking forward to working more closely with Roosevelt Elementary," I said neutrally. "I think there are some interesting opportunities for collaboration." Jennifer smiled, apparently satisfied that we had reached an understanding.
Excellent. I know Dr. Martinez values traditional academic achievement, so I'm sure you'll be working to strengthen those programs. I nodded politely, saying nothing about Dr. Martinez's actual educational philosophy or the true nature of the programs I would be implementing. Let her maintain her assumptions a little longer. The reality would become clear soon enough. As I drove home that night, I realized that my family's renewed acceptance came with expectations that were fundamentally incompatible with my actual role. They wanted me to use my new position to validate their beliefs about education and support their goals for Jamie's development. But my new position was specifically designed to challenge those beliefs and demonstrate alternative approaches to child development and learning. The collision between these incompatible expectations was inevitable. The only question was when and how it would happen. I suspected it would happen sooner than anyone expected, and that when it did, it would change everything. Part 3. The Reckoning. The spring musical auditions were scheduled for the second week of March, exactly 2 months after I had officially started my new position. By then, I had already begun implementing changes that were rippling through the district in ways I hadn't anticipated. Teachers were requesting professional development workshops on creative integration. Parents were asking questions about why their children suddenly seemed more engaged in learning. The school board had received 3 commendations from the state education department about innovative programming. But none of that mattered to Jamie, who had been practicing his audition song in secret, humming melodies under his breath during family dinners, and rehearsing dance steps when he thought no one was watching. Jennifer had maintained her position that the musical would interfere with his accelerated math program. Marcus had added that extracurricular activities should focus on leadership development and college preparation. I had stayed carefully neutral during family conversations about Jamie's interests, neither encouraging nor discouraging his creative pursuits. My role required diplomatic navigation of family dynamics while maintaining professional boundaries. But I had also made sure that Dr. Martinez understood the situation, and together we had developed what we called the Jamie Protocol. The morning of auditions, I was in my district office reviewing grant applications when my assistant knocked on the door. "Sophia, there's a situation developing at Roosevelt. Dr. Martinez asked if you could come over immediately." I arrived at the school to find Jennifer Chen standing in the main office, her voice raised to a level that carried down the hallway. Through the glass partition, I could see Jamie sitting in a chair beside her, his eyes red from crying, still wearing the clothes he had chosen specially for his audition. Dr. Martinez saw me approaching and stepped out of his office with the measured calm of someone who had dealt with difficult parents before. "Mrs. Chen arrived about 20 minutes ago to remove Jamie from the audition process. She's demanding to know why the school scheduled the musical rehearsals during the same time slot as advanced math tutoring." I felt something cold settle in my stomach. The rehearsals are scheduled during advanced math tutoring? They always have been. The arts programming and academic acceleration tracks run simultaneously to allow students to choose their focus areas based on their interests and strengths. Through the glass, I could see Jennifer gesturing emphatically while speaking to the school secretary. Her words weren't audible, but her body language conveyed frustration and authority in equal measure. "She's also asking to speak with the district coordinator responsible for scheduling conflicts," Dr. Martinez continued. "I believe that would be you." For a moment, I stood frozen. This was the collision I had been anticipating, the moment when my professional responsibilities would directly conflict with family expectations. But I hadn't expected it to happen so publicly, with Jamie caught in the middle, or with Jennifer completely unaware that the district coordinator she wanted to confront was her own sister-in-law. "Where is Jamie supposed to be right now?" I asked. "In the auditorium. Audition started 15 minutes ago." I looked through the glass partition at my nephew, who sat with his shoulders hunched and his hands folded in his lap. He had been preparing for this moment for weeks, working up the courage to pursue something he loved, despite his parents' disapproval. Now he was sitting in the principal's office while his opportunity slipped away. I made a decision that would change everything. "Dr. Martinez, please ask Mrs. Chen to step into your office. Tell her the district coordinator is available to discuss scheduling policies immediately." He raised his eyebrows slightly. "Are you sure about this approach?" I'm sure. Dr. Martinez disappeared into the office, and moments later, Jennifer emerged, straightening her blazer with the brisk efficiency of someone preparing for battle. She had dressed for confrontation in her sharpest business attire, ready to intimidate school administrators with professional authority and parental righteousness. She stopped short when she saw me standing in the hallway. "Sophia, what are you doing here?" "Hello, Jennifer. I understand you wanted to speak with the district coordinator about scheduling policies." Her expression shifted from surprise to confusion to something approaching suspicion. "Yes, but I'm waiting to meet with whoever is in charge of these programs. There's clearly been a miscommunication about priorities." I straightened my shoulders and adopted the professional tone I had been practicing in district meetings for 2 months. "I'm the coordinator you're waiting to meet with. I'm the district administrator responsible for arts integration programming and scheduling." The silence that followed was so complete, I could hear the clock ticking in the main office. Jennifer's face went through a series of expressions as she processed information that didn't fit her understanding of the world. "You're the district coordinator? You're in charge of the arts programs?" "I'm in charge of arts integration across all 6 elementary schools, plus consultation with middle and high school programs."
The musical auditions are part of a comprehensive creative learning initiative that I designed and implemented. Jennifer's confusion hardened into something that looked like betrayal. "You never said you were responsible for the programs that are interfering with Jamie's academic advancement." "The programs aren't interfering with academic advancement. They're providing alternative pathways to academic achievement through creative expression and integrated learning." Behind Jennifer, I could see Jamie watching our conversation through the glass partition. His confusion was obvious, but there was something else in his expression. Hope, maybe? Or recognition that the adult who had always supported his interests might finally be in a position to do something about it. "This is ridiculous," Jennifer said, her voice rising. "You're telling me that my son's educational schedule is being determined by someone whose expertise is finger painting and craft projects?" The dismissiveness in her voice triggered something I had been suppressing for months. All the years of condescension, all the family gatherings where my career had been treated as a hobby, all the times I had been made to feel like my professional knowledge was irrelevant. "My expertise," I said, keeping my voice level, "is in research-based educational practices that have been proven to improve student engagement, academic performance, and social-emotional development. The programs I've implemented have resulted in measurable improvements across multiple assessment metrics." "Assessment metrics?" Jennifer's tone suggested she thought I was making things up. "You're an art teacher, Sophia. You don't know anything about real educational assessment." Dr. Martinez cleared his throat. "Actually, Mrs. Chen, Sophia has published research on creative learning assessment that has been cited in multiple educational journals. Her work is considered innovative in the field." Jennifer turned to look at him as if he had started speaking a foreign language. "Published research?" I pulled out my phone and opened the folder where I kept PDFs of my published articles. "Would you like to see my publication record? Or perhaps the documentation of improved standardized test scores among students in integrated arts programs? Or maybe the grant funding we've received based on the success of these initiatives?" Jennifer stared at the phone screen, scrolling through titles that clearly meant nothing to her, but sounded impressively academic. "These are real publications? In real journals?" "They're peer-reviewed articles in respected educational research publications. The work I've been doing for the past 5 years has been contributing to a growing body of research about effective teaching practices." The information seemed to be reshaping Jennifer's understanding of reality in real time. Her voice became smaller, less certain. "But you're just a teacher. You work with children's art projects." "I'm an educational specialist with expertise in creative learning integration. I work with evidence-based practices that help children access academic content through multiple modalities." I paused, letting that sink in. "The children's art projects you've been dismissing are actually sophisticated learning experiences that develop critical thinking, problem-solving, and communication skills." Jamie had pressed his face against the glass partition, trying to hear our conversation.
Through the barrier, I could see him mouthing words, trying to figure out what was happening to his audition, to his afternoon, to his family dynamics. I want to see the research, Jennifer said suddenly. I want documentation of these claims about improved academic performance. I looked at Dr. Martinez, who nodded. We can arrange a comprehensive presentation of our program data, Mrs. Chen, but right now, Jamie's audition window is closing. He has about 10 minutes left to participate if that's what he chooses. Jennifer looked toward the office where Jamie sat waiting, then back at me, then at Dr. Martinez. Her carefully constructed worldview was crumbling, and she was trying to figure out how to rebuild it. If these programs are academically valuable, she said slowly, then why didn't anyone explain that to us? Why were we told that Jamie needed to choose between creative activities and academic advancement? Nobody told you Jamie had to choose, I said gently. The integrated approach means students can pursue creative expression while strengthening academic skills. The artificial division between arts and academics is exactly what our programming is designed to address. Dr. Martinez stepped forward. Mrs. Chen, would you like Jamie to have the opportunity to audition? We can schedule a brief meeting next week to review program documentation and discuss how creative participation supports his overall educational goals. Jennifer was quiet for a long moment, processing. Then she looked at me with an expression I had never seen before. It wasn't respect exactly, but it wasn't dismissal either. It was recognition, maybe, or recalibration. You really know what you're talking about, she said, and it sounded like a question. I really know what I'm talking about. She turned toward the office where Jamie waited. Through the glass, we could see him watching us with barely contained anxiety, his audition clothes wrinkled from sitting and worrying. Jamie, Jennifer called, opening the office door. Do you still want to try out for the musical? The transformation in Jamie's face was immediate and complete. He leapt from the chair with the kind of energy that only comes from relief and excitement combined. Really? I can audition? You can audition, but we're also going to have a family meeting about balancing different kinds of learning. As Jamie ran toward the auditorium, his footsteps echoing in the hallway, Jennifer turned back to me. This doesn't mean I understand what just happened, or that I'm comfortable with how much I apparently didn't know about your actual qualifications. That's fair, I said. There's been a lot of miscommunication over the years.
Is that what we're calling it? Miscommunication? I met her gaze directly. I'm calling it an opportunity to start over with better information. That evening, I received 3 phone calls. The first was from Marcus, who had apparently been briefed by Jennifer about the day's revelations. His tone was carefully neutral, the voice of someone trying not to admit how wrong he had been. Jennifer says you've been published in academic journals, he said without preamble. She says you have some kind of advanced expertise that we didn't know about. I have the same expertise I've always had, Marcus. You just never asked about the details of my work. There was a pause. We assumed teaching elementary art was, straightforward. We didn't realize there was research involved. There's research involved in all effective teaching. I just chose to engage with it more deeply than some educators do. The second call was from my mother, whose tone carried a mixture of pride and bewilderment. Sophia, I don't understand why you never told us about your publications. We would have been so proud to know you were contributing to your field. I tried to tell you about my work many times, Mom, but every time I mentioned research or professional development, the conversation shifted to when I was going to find a more practical career. We didn't know you were doing important work. We thought you were just, keeping children busy with crafts. The third call was from Jamie, who had been given permission to call me after dinner to share the results of his audition. Aunt Sophia, I got a part. Not the lead, but I'm going to be the narrator, and Dr. Martinez says that's actually the most important role because I have to help the audience understand the story. His excitement was infectious, but what struck me most was his confidence. For the first time since I had known him, Jamie sounded like a child who believed that the things he cared about were valued by the adults in his life. I'm so proud of you, Jamie.
You were brave today, and you earned that part through your own talent and hard work. Mom says we're going to have a family meeting about my school activities. She says you're going to explain how creative stuff can also be academic stuff. I smiled, imagining Jennifer trying to process everything she had learned about my professional identity. What do you think about that? I think it's going to be really interesting, and I think Mom and Dad are going to learn some new things. 2 weeks later, I sat in my parents' living room with the entire Chen family gathered around coffee and cake, delivering a presentation about creative learning integration that I had originally developed for district administrators. Using my laptop and a borrowed projector, I walked my family through 5 years of research, documentation, and evidence-based practice. I showed them test score improvements among students in integrated arts programs. I explained the neuroscience of creative learning and how artistic expression activates multiple brain regions simultaneously. I demonstrated assessment tools that measure student growth across cognitive, social, and emotional domains. But most importantly, I helped them understand that Jamie's interest in performance wasn't a distraction from learning. It was learning, just in a different modality than they had recognized. Marcus asked thoughtful questions about research methodology. Jennifer wanted to see longitudinal data about student outcomes. My parents expressed amazement that their daughter had been contributing to educational knowledge in ways they had never understood. At the end of the presentation, my grandmother, who rarely spoke at family gatherings, raised her hand like a student with a question. Sophia, are you telling us that you've been an expert all along and we just didn't know enough to recognize it? I considered the question carefully. I'm telling you that expertise can look different than we expect, and that sometimes we miss important work because it doesn't fit our assumptions about what valuable contributions look like. 6 months later, I was invited to present my research at the National Education Association conference in Denver. The presentation was titled, "From Marginalization to Leadership: How Arts Integration Transforms Educational Outcomes," and it was attended by over 300 educators from around the country. Marcus and Jennifer flew to Denver to watch me deliver the keynote address. They sat in the front row, looking simultaneously proud and bewildered as their former disappointment spoke to a room full of educational leaders about innovative teaching practices and systemic change. After the presentation, as we stood in the conference center lobby surrounded by educators who wanted to discuss implementation strategies and collaboration opportunities, Jennifer pulled me aside. "I owe you an apology, Sophia. Not just for the school play incident or for the years of dismissing your career, but for assuming I understood the value of work I had never bothered to learn about." I looked at her, remembering the woman who had told me I didn't belong in the family section of an elementary school auditorium, who had suggested I sit in the back row where I wouldn't embarrass anyone. "Apology accepted," I said. "But more importantly, I'm grateful that you were willing to learn something new about what I do. I'm grateful that you were patient enough to teach us." That evening, at the conference dinner, I received the National Arts Education Leadership Award for innovative programming and research contributions. As I stood at the podium accepting the recognition, I looked out at an audience of my professional peers and thought about the journey that had brought me there. It had started with a crumpled program in an elementary school auditorium, with a nephew in a robot costume and a family that couldn't see past their own assumptions. It had continued through months of strategic planning, professional development, and careful relationship building. But it had culminated in something I never could have predicted, not just personal vindication, but systemic change that was improving educational outcomes for thousands of students. Jamie, now 9 years old and confidently balancing advanced mathematics with theater participation, had written me a letter that I carried in my briefcase during the conference. It said, "Aunt Sophia, thank you for teaching my parents that being creative and being smart are the same thing. Now I don't have to choose anymore." As I drove home from the airport after the conference, I reflected on how completely my life had transformed in the space of 1 year. I had gone from being the family disappointment who sat in folding chairs in the back row to being a nationally recognized expert whose work was influencing educational policy at the state and federal level. But more than that, I had learned that sometimes the most powerful vindication doesn't come from proving your worth to people who underestimated you. It comes from discovering that your worth was never actually in question, that you had been building something meaningful all along, and that the right moment would eventually arrive for others to recognize what had always been true. The Chen family had learned to see me differently, but what mattered more was that I had learned to see myself differently. I was no longer fighting to prove I belonged at the table. I was building better tables. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.